The gentle whir of Lili Chen's workbench machinery hummed through the quiet valleys of Pine Grove, as predictable as the mountain sunrise. Her skilled fingers danced across the intricate mechanisms spread before her, each component falling into place with the precision that had once made her the military's most brilliant combat engineer. The local townspeople knew her only as the kind widow who fixed their farming equipment and helped design better irrigation systems. They had no idea that the same hands that repaired their tractors had once crafted the most sophisticated defense systems in modern warfare. "Miss Lili! Miss Lili!" Young Amy Parker's voice crackled with urgency as she burst into the workshop, her red braids flying. "Pa says you need to know. The Hawthorne Gang's been spotted just outside the county line." Lili didn't pause in her work, carefully adjusting a delicate spring mechanism. "That so?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying the subtle hints of her time spent at military bases across the globe. She was a petite woman, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical bun, and laugh lines around her eyes that belied the calculating intelligence behind them. Her clothes were simple: work pants, a faded blue shirt, and a utility vest with dozens of pockets that had seen more sunsets than most people had seen hot meals. "Yes, ma'am. Sheriff Miller's calling a town meeting. Says they've hit 3 farmsteads. This month already. Burned out the Reynolds place just last week when they wouldn't pay protection money." Amy shifted nervously from foot to foot, her 12-year-old frame vibrating with nervous energy. Lili carefully set down her tools, using a cloth to wipe the machine oil from her hands. "Best run home then, Amy. Tell your mother to lock up tight. Tonight. But aren't you coming to the meeting? Pa says every able body needs to be there. The Hawthorns, they're different from regular bandits. They use tactics, planning, military gear they've stolen from supply convoys." A shadow passed across Lili's face, brief as a cloud across the sun. "Sometimes the best help comes from staying quiet and watching, Amy. Now go on. Your mother will be worried." As the girl's footsteps faded, Lili moved to a locked cabinet in the corner of her workshop. The key had hung around her neck for 5 years, hidden beneath her shirt as a constant reminder. Inside, past the ordinary tools and spare parts, a false back concealed something else: blueprints, tactical analyses, and a worn laptop containing designs that would make military contractors salivate. Lili ran her fingers over the laptops. In case remembering, before Pine Grove, before her quiet life as a widow and mechanic, she had been Major Lili Chen, head of the Army Corps of Engineers Special Defense Unit. Her team had developed revolutionary defense systems, saving countless lives, until that final mission in Kandahar, when corruption in the ranks had led to her husband's death and her resignation. The sound of approaching vehicles drew her attention. Through the workshop windows, she watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the town's only diner. Men in tactical gear emerged, moving with military precision. Their leader stood out, tall, scarred, wearing a modified combat vest. Jake, the engineer Hawthorne, former Special Forces, now the most notorious tactical raider in 3 states. Lili watched through the blinds as Hawthorne's men secured the street with practiced efficiency. They weren't just bandits, they were trained soldiers gone bad, the kind of men who knew how to break any defense, or so they thought, the kind of men who had never faced someone who knew how to think 3 steps ahead. Moving quietly, Lili accessed a hidden panel beneath her workbench. Inside lay the tools of her former trade: micro cameras, pressure sensors, motion detectors, and components that could be transformed into sophisticated countermeasures. She hadn't touched them in 5 years, had sworn she was done with that life. But as she watched Hawthorne's men terrorize her town, she realized some skills couldn't be buried, shouldn't be buried, when innocent lives were at stake. Amy's father, Tom Parker, had been the first to welcome her to Pine Grove, helping her set up her workshop when she arrived with nothing but grief and a need to start over. Emma Sullivan at the diner had brought her meals until she got on her feet. The whole town had embraced her, never questioning her past, only caring about who she chose to be now. Lili began gathering components, her mind already mapping out defensive positions, calculating angles and approaches. She hadn't built weapons in 5 years, but she had never stopped designing, never stopped analyzing. Every repair job, every irrigation project had been a chance to understand the town's layout, its vulnerabilities, and its defensive potential. She knew what Hawthorne would see, a sleepy farming town, ripe for exploitation. He wouldn't see the irrigation channels that could become moats, the grain silos perfect for surveillance posts, or the workshop of a widow who had spent 20 years learning how to turn everyday objects into sophisticated defense systems. Time to wake up old ghosts, Lili whispered, reaching for her tools. Pinegrove had given her a home when she needed one most. Now it was time to return the favor, to prove that sometimes the best defense came from the most unexpected places. And if Jake Hawthorne thought he was the only one who knew how to think tactically, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the workshop windows as Lili began her preparations. In the distance, she could hear the town meeting getting underway, voices raised in fear and anger. But Lili remained at her workbench, where her skilled hands had already begun crafting the first of many surprises for the men who dared threaten her home. From the diner's window, Hawthorne watched the town with the calculated gaze of a predator. He had no way of knowing that the real predator was the quiet widow in the workshop on the edge of town, whose mind was already turning their own tactical expertise into a weapon against them. Through the diner's swinging doors strode Jake Hawthorne and his men, their tactical boots echoing against the worn linoleum. The afternoon crowd fell silent, farmers and shopkeepers drawing back from their half-finished meals. Hawthorne cut an imposing figure, his scarred face and military bearing marking him as something far more dangerous than a common thief. "Evening, folks." Hawthorne's voice carried the practiced authority of a former commander. "Hope we're not interrupting anything important." His eyes swept the room, cataloguing exits, positions, threats. Behind the counter, Emma Sullivan kept her expression neutral, though her hand drifted beneath the counter where Lili had recently installed what looked like a simple alarm button. "We serve paying customers here, Mr. Hawthorne," Emma said steadily, her silver hair catching the late sunlight streaming through the windows. Hawthorne's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Not particularly hospitable, Miss Emma, especially since my team has traveled so far to discuss business opportunities with your fine establishment." He moved to the counter with practiced ease, his men spreading out to cover the room. The diner had grown deathly quiet, save for the soft hum of the overhead fans and the nervous shuffling of feet. Hawthorne reached into his tactical vest, causing several patrons to flinch, but withdrew only $100 bill, which he placed carefully on the counter. "There's your payment now. About that coffee I smell brewing." Emma's hand trembled slightly as she poured a cup, setting it before him. Hawthorne took a slow sip, nodding appreciatively. "Fine coffee indeed. Though, I hear your establishment's been having some trouble lately. Security isn't what it used to be, what with Sheriff Miller being stretched so thin." He poured another cup. "Shame if anything were to happen. Electrical fires are particularly dangerous in these old buildings." The sound of machinery from the direction of Lili's workshop caught his attention. "What's that?" One of his men, a muscular figure with a burn scar running down his neck, Carter, his second in command, peered out the window. "Just some widow's repair shop boss, still working despite the town meeting. Working when citizens should be paying. Attention to important community discussions." Hawthorne's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Carter, why don't you explain to our industrious friend the importance of proper civic participation?" "Funny thing about the past." Hawthorne's smile returned, but now it held the predatory gleam of a wolf that had cornered its prey. "It has a way of catching up to a person, no matter how far they run." He barked to his men without taking his eyes off Lili. "Boys, looks like we hit the jackpot. The bounty on the ghost engineer's tech is worth more than this whole miserable town." The mercenaries spread out, forming a loose circle around the workshop. The townspeople began backing away, mothers hurrying their children indoors, men looking anywhere but at the scene unfolding before them. "Last chance, engineer," Hawthorne said, emphasizing the word with mock respect. "Come quiet, share those brilliant designs of yours, or we paint this workshop with something darker than machine oil." Lili's eyes scanned the semicircle of armed men, noting positions, equipment, the way each man moved. Old habits died hard. 12 men, she said quietly, to take one mechanic. "One mechanic?" Hawthorne laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Way I heard it, you once turned an entire valley into a kill box that took out a platoon of elite insurgents without firing a single shot. Figure 12 might make it sporting." A warm breeze stirred the metal shavings at Lili's feet. From somewhere, down the street, came the sound of shutters being hurriedly closed, the town battening down for the storm everyone could feel coming. "That was a different person," Lili said. "In a different time. Different person." Hawthorne's voice dripped. "With mockery. Let's see just how different." He nodded to Carter. "Check her for weapons." Carter moved forward cautiously, his dark eyes never leaving Lili's face. He patted down her clothes with quick, professional movements. "Clean," he reported, stepping back. "No weapons." Hawthorne's eyebrows rose. "The famous ghost engineer walking around unarmed? Now that is different." His smile widened. "Makes our job a whole lot easier, doesn't it, boys?" "I told you," Lili said, her voice carrying the patience of someone explaining basic physics to a child. "I'm just here to fix things." "Fix things?" Hawthorne spat on the ground. "Fix what? A life hiding from who you really are? A reputation as some peace-loving mechanic?" He stepped closer, his tactical boots crunching on scattered washers. "Engineers like us, Chen, we don't change. We just find new ways to lie to ourselves." Lili's hands remained steady on her workbench. "Maybe you're right, Mr. Hawthorne, maybe we don't change." Her eyes met his. "But we can choose what we build." "Choice?" Hawthorne laughed harshly. "Only choice you have now is how you want to die. On your feet like the tactical genius you pretend not to be, or on your knees like the coward you've become." A small figure darted out from between two buildings. "Miss Lili!" Amy Parker's voice rang out. "I brought help! I brought—" "Amy, get back!" Lili's command cracked like a whip, freezing the girl in her tracks. In the same instant, Hawthorne's weapon appeared in his hand, aimed not at Lili, but at the child. "Well, well," Hawthorne drawled. "Seems we've found some motivation after all." Lili's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, something cold, something that made Carter take another step back. "Let the girl go," Lili said quietly. "This is between us." "Between us?" Hawthorne's weapon remained trained. "On Amy. Everything's between all of us, Chen. Every choice, every consequence. You want to protect this town, these people. Then it's time to show them who you really are." The evening shadows had grown longer, painting stark lines across the dusty street. From the diner doorway, Emma Sullivan watched with growing horror, her hands clasped over her mouth. Several of the townspeople had gathered at windows and doorways, drawn by the confrontation, but too afraid to intervene. Sheriff Miller was nowhere to be seen, likely still at the town meeting Lili had chosen to skip. She knew there would be no help coming from that quarter. This was between her and the ghosts she'd tried to leave behind. "You know, Chen," Hawthorne dragged out, his weapon still trained on Amy, "I heard interesting things about how you quit. Story goes you walked away after that mess in Kandahar, something about the wrong people getting caught in your systems." He smiled as Lili's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Hit a nerve, did I?" "That's enough," Lili said, her voice carrying a warning that made several of Hawthorne's men shift nervously. "Oh, but it ain't nearly enough," Hawthorne continued. "See, I knew your husband, Captain David Chen. Man, you got killed with your precious—" He failed safes. His eyes glittered dangerously. "Guess you could say this reunion was meant to be." Lily's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced back to that terrible day in Kandahar. The defense system that had been compromised, the trap that had been turned against her own people. It had been a fair operation, everything by the book, but someone had sold them out. David had died trying to manually override the systems. His face as he realized what was happening, that was what had finally made Lili Chen hang up her tools. Or so she'd thought. "Amy," Lily said, her voice gentle but firm, "close your eyes, sweetheart." The girl trembled but obeyed, squeezing her eyes shut. In that same moment, Lily's hand moved. It wasn't a dramatic movement, no flourish, no warning. One moment her hand was empty, the next she had pressed something on her workbench. A subtle click echoed through the workshop. Suddenly every piece of electronic equipment Hawthorne's men carried, their radios, tactical lights, laser sights, went dead simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse was localized, precise, just, like everything Lily designed. "That's one," Lily said quietly. The street had gone absolutely still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Hawthorne still stared at his dead equipment, then at his useless tactical gear, his face a mask of disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "An EMP? You had this place rigged already?" "Miss Lily," Carter breathed, his voice filled with dawning horror. "She hasn't been just fixing equipment all these years. She's been preparing—" "Amy!" Lily called out, never taking her eyes off the mercenaries. "Open your eyes and walk backwards, slow and steady. Your father's waiting behind the grain silo." The girl did as she was told, her shoes scraping against the dusty street as she retreated. None of Hawthorne's men dared move to stop her. Not now. "Now then," Lily continued, her voice still quiet but carrying clearly in the silence, "we can do this one of two ways. You can gather up your wounded pride and your dead equipment, Mr. Hawthorne, and ride out of Pine Grove. Or we can see if the stories about me are really true." Hawthorne's face contorted with rage. "You think one lucky trap with a hidden EMP makes you the engineer you used to be? Boys," he bellowed to his men, $100,000 extra to whoever brings me her head." Weapons appeared in hands all around the semicircle. Lily didn't appear concerned. If anything, a hint of sadness crossed her features. "The EMP was a courtesy," she said softly. "A warning, to show you what you're dealing with. The rest of the workshop, that's gonna hurt." Her free hand moved to a panel on her workbench that had looked like a simple power strip to all who'd seen her work. But as she flipped a series of switches, the evening air suddenly filled with the soft whir of dozens of hidden mechanisms activating. "Sweet Jesus," Carter breathed, his tactical training recognizing the sound of multiple systems engaging. "Boss, she's turned this whole street into a kill box," Lily finished quietly. "Just like old times. Take her!" Hawthorne screamed, reaching for his backup weapon. The street erupted in chaos. Later, witnesses would argue about exactly what happened next. Some swore the ground itself seemed to come alive with traps. Others insisted they saw strong nets spring from nowhere, while targeted sonic pulses disoriented the mercenaries with scientific precision. The only thing they all agreed on was the clinical efficiency, the terrible, beautiful precision. When the dust settled, 8 of Hawthorne's men lay immobilized in various states of entrapment. 2 more stood frozen, caught between mechanical barriers that had sprung from seemingly solid ground. The remaining men, including Carter, had their hands raised, their weapons discarded. Only Hawthorne remained, his backup weapon half-drawn, his face a mask of pure hatred. "You're still the same calculator you always were," he snarled. "All this mechanical work, all this pretending. You can't build anything that'll wash away who you really are." Lily's hand hadn't moved from the control panel. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Hawthorne. I am what I am, but every engineer gets to choose what they build with the skills they've developed." Her eyes hardened. "I chose to build protections, safeguards, ways to defend without destroying. You chose to use your knowledge to hurt people. That's the only difference that matters." Hawthorne's weapon hand twitched. "Pretty words. Let's see if they stop bullets." His draw was fast, blindingly fast, the kind of speed that had kept him alive through countless operations. But Lili Chen hadn't survived all those years in combat. Zones by being unprepared. The moment Hawthorne moved, 3 distinct mechanisms activated in perfect sequence. First, a focused magnetic pulse stripped the firing pin from his weapon. Second, a concealed pneumatic system yanked the gun from his grip. Third, a series of titanium restraints emerged from what had appeared to be ordinary floor tiles, pinning him in place. 3 systems, Lili said softly, just like the old days. One to disarm, one to secure, one to contain. Hawthorne stood frozen, blood trickling from where the restraints bit into his tactical gear. For a long moment, only the distant rumble of thunder broke the silence. Finally, the mercenary leader's shoulders slumped. "It's over, boys," he called to his remaining men. The few still capable of movement began dropping their weapons. Lili remained motionless, her hand hovering over the control panel, as sheriff. Miller and his deputies finally arrived to secure the prisoners. "Don't come back to Pine Grove," she said. "Next time won't be a demonstration." Hawthorne's face was a study in conflicting emotions, rage, fear, and something that might have been respect. "They'll come for you now," he said. "Every military contractor and black ops team between here and Washington. The ghost engineer back from the dead, building defenses that can neutralize elite units without casualties. They won't let that kind of talent stay hidden." Lili finally lowered her hand from the controls. "Maybe not, but that's tomorrow's problem. Today I've got tractors to fix." She turned back to her workbench, setting the control panel carefully beside her wrench. "Daylight's wasting." The thunder grew closer as Miller's deputies led Hawthorne and his men away, the setting sun casting their shadows long across the street as they disappeared into the gathering dusk. Emma Sullivan hurried across from the diner, her apron still dusted with flour. "Miss Chen," she said softly, we had no idea, all this time." "No reason you should have, Miss Emma," Lili replied, already turning back to her work. But Emma, who caught her arm, making her pause. "My late husband," she said softly. "He served in Afghanistan. Used to tell stories about an engineer who could turn any terrain into an impregnable fortress, but never with lethal force. Said she was a legend." Lili gently removed Emma's hand from her arm. "Legends have a way of growing bigger than the people they're about, Miss Emma. Your husband sounds like he was a good man. Best honor him by remembering him, not stories about strangers." "But you're not a stranger anymore," Emma insisted. "You're part of Pine Grove now. Those men, they'll be back, or others will come. You can't just pretend today didn't happen." Lili picked up her wrench, its weight familiar and comforting, in her hand. "I'm not pretending anything, just choosing what kind of person I want to be, one day at a time." "Miss Lili?" Amy's voice came from behind her, small but steady. Are you really her? The ghost engineer?" Lili turned to find not just Amy, but what seemed like the whole town emerging from their hiding places, looking at her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "I was," she said simply. "Now I'm just a mechanic, one who'd appreciate some help cleaning up this mess before the storm hits." She held out a spare wrench. "Want to learn how to build something that protects instead of hurts?" The girl's face lit up as she took the tool, and slowly others began stepping forward, men and women who'd hidden from the confrontation now offering their hands to help rebuild. As the first fat drops of rain began to fall, The sound of tools filled the air once more. Sheriff Miller approached as the first damaged equipment was being cleared, taking in the scene of townspeople working together with obvious surprise. "Heard there was trouble," the sheriff said. "Heard the ghost engineer handled it." Lili drove another bolt home before answering. "No trouble, Sheriff. Just some men who needed reminding that Pine Grove's not the kind of town they're looking for." Miller nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. "And the ghost engineer?" "She's retired," Lili said firmly. "Just a mechanic here, nothing more." "Might not be that simple," Miller warned. "Word will spread. Military contractors, private security firms, all looking to acquire your expertise. Then they'll find a mechanic," Lili replied, "unless they force me to be something else." She paused in her work, meeting Miller's eyes. "But I'd appreciate your help in making sure it doesn't come to that." The sheriff considered this, then extended his hand. "Welcome to Pine Grove, Miss Chen, officially." As they shook hands, the storm finally broke overhead, rain pattering on the workshop's roof. But no one made a move to leave. The control panel remained on Lili's workbench, slowly gathering dust. A tool she hoped would stay unused, but never, far from reach. After all, a good engineer knew that sometimes the right system made all the difference between protecting something that would last and watching it all come crashing down. The rain continued to fall as the townspeople worked together, transforming the workshop from a battlefield back into a place of creation. With each tool they restored, with each piece of equipment they salvaged, they were building something more than just a repair shop. They were building trust, community, and a future Lili Chen had chosen to protect. The rain continued to fall as Lili Chen wiped sweat from her brow, carefully adjusting the calibration on a defense mechanism hidden within an innocent-looking irrigation pipe. Amy Parker handed up tools from below, having appointed herself the engineer's unofficial apprentice. "Miss Lili," Amy called up, "Ryder's coming." Lili didn't pause her work, but her eyes flicked to the control panel where her defense systems hummed quietly. "How many?" "Just 2. Look like government types. Black SUV, suits." The girl frowned. "Not like Hawthorne's men." The riders approached. At an unhurried pace, a man and woman in dark suits, their vehicles spotless despite the muddy roads. Lili's hands stilled on the mechanism as recognition hit her like a physical blow. "Colonel Rebecca Hayes," she breathed. Amy looked up, confused. "You know them, Miss Lili." "Get inside the workshop, Amy. Now." The girl hesitated only a moment before obeying, recognizing the tone in Lili's voice, the same tone from yesterday, right before the traps had sprung. Lili climbed down from the irrigation system with deliberate care, wiping her hands as the visitors pulled up in front of her workshop. Colonel Hayes hadn't changed much. Still razor-sharp in her pressed suit, her silver hair cut in a precise, military style. The man with her was younger, carried himself like intelligence branch. They both exited the vehicle with practiced efficiency. "Hello, Lili," Hayes said quietly. "Colonel," Lili inclined her head slightly. "Long way from the Pentagon." "It's director now, actually. Advanced Defense Systems Division," Hayes gestured to her companion. "Agent Marcus Collins, Defense Intelligence Agency." Lili's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in her stomach. She'd wondered when the government would finally catch up to her. Collins stepped forward, his manner professional but not unfriendly. "Major Chen, your reputation precedes you. It's just Lili now." She turned back to her work. "I'm just a mechanic." "So we heard," Hayes said, an edge creeping into her voice. "Tell me, Lili, do you sleep well at night? Does the memory of Kandahar, of all those systems you left unfinished, haunt your dreams?" "Every night," Lili replied quietly. "David's face most of all." "Captain Chen was a hero," Collins said softly. "His sacrifice saved dozens of lives." A sacrifice that wouldn't have been necessary if someone hadn't compromised my systems. Lily's voice rose slightly. If someone in command hadn't sold us. Outé, Hayes stepped forward. That's partly why we're here, Lili. We found them, the officers who betrayed the unit. They've been dealt with. Lili turned to face them fully now. What do you want? We've been monitoring you, Collins explained. Yesterday's incident with Hawthorne's men. You neutralized an elite mercenary unit without a single casualty. The defensive systems you've integrated into this town, they're more advanced than anything we currently have in development. I'm not interested in government work anymore, Lili said firmly. We're not asking you to come back to active duty, Hayes countered. We're offering you something else, a civilian contractor position, full autonomy, your own research facility. She paused meaningfully. And a chance to finish what you started in Kandahar. Lili looked at the half-finished irrigation system, at her workshop, where Amy peeked nervously through the window. I have work here. Important work, Collins acknowledged. But think about what else you could protect. The systems you designed, the non-lethal countermeasures. They could save thousands of lives. Isn't that worth coming back for? I build things now, Lili said softly. Real things, tangible things, not weapons. Defense systems aren't weapons, Lili, Hayes pressed. You taught me that, remember? They're shields, protection, and right now we need those shields more than ever. Before Lili could respond, Emma Sullivan approached, carrying her usual mid-morning coffee delivery. She paused when she saw the visitors, her expression guarded. Everything all right, Lili? Emma asked, setting down the coffee. Hayes watched the interaction with interest. You've built a life here, she observed. We're not asking you to leave it. The facility we're proposing, it could be here in Pine Grove. Think of it, a research center that could bring jobs, development, security, and make this town a target, Lili countered. It's already a target, Collins said quietly. Hawthorne was just the beginning. Word spreading about the ghost engineer's return. At least with official backing, you'd have resources, protection. Emma stepped closer to Lili, her presence supportive but also protective. Seems to me Lili's been doing just fine protecting us on her own. Hayes smiled slightly. You care about these people, Lili. We're offering you a chance to protect not just them, but communities like this all across the country. Lili ran her fingers over a nearby piece of machinery, feeling the precision engineering beneath its humble exterior. If I do this, if I accept your offer, I do it my way. No compromises, no hidden agendas. Those are exactly the terms we were hoping for, Collins replied. Your reputation for ethical engineering is precisely why we sought you out. And afterward? Lili asked. When the systems are built? You can stay here, Hayes promised. Continue your work, your life, but with resources, support, and full clearance of any remaining questions about Kandahar. Amy emerged from the workshop, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Are you leaving us, Miss Lili? Lili knelt down to Amy's level, noticing how the girl clutched her toolkit, the one Lili had helped her assemble from spare parts. Remember what I taught you about engineering, Amy, about how every system needs multiple layers of protection. The girl straightened proudly. Yes, ma'am. You said the best defense isn't just one big wall, but lots of smaller solutions working together. That's right, Lili smiled, though her eyes remained serious. She stood, facing Hayes and Collins. If I take this position, I'll need deputies, people who understand both sides of the work. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. We've already thought of that. Sheriff Miller recommended some names, and young Amy there seems to have quite the aptitude for mechanical engineering. Amy's eyes widened. Really, Miss Lili, you'll teach me more about building protective systems. If your parents agree, Lili smiled, ruffling the girl's hair. Every good engineer needs an apprentice. And every good protector needs someone to remind them what they're fighting for. Emma stepped forward. And what about those of us who need something else from you? The unspoken tension between them was palpable, the possibility of something. More than friendship that had been growing over shared coffee and quiet conversations. Lily met her gaze. I reckon an engineer who can be both builder and protector might find time to be something else too, if she's got the right motivation. Director Hayes cleared her throat. Well, I should see about getting the preliminary paperwork started. Town. Council meetings at noon, I believe. She gathered her briefcase. Think about the offer, Lily. The country's changing. Men like Hawthorne, they're the past. We need people who can help build a safer future. As Hayes and Collins headed toward their vehicle, Lily turned back to her work, but now she saw it differently. Not just as a repair shop, but as the foundation for something larger. A place where people could learn both practical skills and protective innovations, where the children of farmers and soldiers alike could become something more than their parents imagined. Amy, she called out, bring up that servo motor. Time to show you how to calibrate a motion sensor that'll last through anything. The girl scrambled to comply, eager to learn. Below, Emma and Hayes exchanged knowing looks before heading off to their own tasks. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, that Lili Chen had finally found her true calling, not as a military engineer who tried to build, but as a builder, who knew how to protect when building wasn't enough. The morning sun broke through the storm clouds, promising another day of work, growth, and possibility. And if there were dark clouds on the horizon, military contractors, private security firms, other threats yet unknown, well, that was all the more reason to build something strong. After all, the best defensive systems were the ones built knowing they'd have to weather storms. Lily pulled up the schematics for her latest project on her tablet, a comprehensive defensive grid for the entire town, one that could be replicated in other communities. Her fingers moved swiftly over the screen, making adjustments, adding layers of protection. Miss Lily? Amy's voice was thoughtful as she sorted through components. Those government people, they're right, aren't they? About other people coming after your designs? Lily paused her work, considering her answer carefully. Yes, they are. But that's why we build layers of defense, Amy. Not just physical ones, but community ones too. People protecting people. Like how everybody helped clean up after the fight. With Hawthorne's men. Exactly, Lily smiled. The strongest security system isn't made of metal and circuits. It's made of people who look out for each other. The workshop door opened, and Tom Parker, Amy's father, stepped in. He carried a large box that clinked with metal components. Brought those parts you asked for, Lily, though I suspect they ain't just for tractor repair anymore. Lily met his gaze steadily. Tom, I need to be honest with you about Amy's apprenticeship, about what I'm really teaching her. He held up a hand, stopping her. We know what you're teaching her, Lily. The whole town knows now, and we trust you. He set down the box. My daughter could learn from worse people than someone who figures out how to stop bad men without killing them. The simple acceptance in his words touched something deep in Lily's heart. 5 years ago, she'd come to Pine Grove, running from her past. Now somehow, that past had become a foundation for a different kind of future. The sound of Amy sorting components with practiced efficiency filled the workshop. Lily watched her young apprentice work, seeing not just the girl she was, but the protector she could become. Someone who understood that the greatest strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to defend what mattered most. Thus, morning wore on, and Lili Chen, once the ghost engineer, now something more complex and perhaps more valuable, continued building her layers of defense, some mechanical, some electronic, but all designed to protect rather than harm. And sometimes strayed to the hidden control panel, checking its readiness. Well, A good engineer always kept her backup systems primed. After all, the best defense wasn't just about being ready for the storm. It was about building something strong enough to shelter others when it came. The rhythmic hum of Lily's workshop was interrupted by the urgent crackle of the emergency radio system she'd installed throughout Pine Grove. Sheriff Miller's voice cut through the quiet morning air. "Lily, got word from Silver Creek. Hawthorne's escaped federal custody. He's gathered a crew, military contractors, ex-special forces. They hit 3 towns between here and the state line." Lily's hands stilled on the irrigation system she'd been modifying. Beside her, Amy looked up from her lesson on pressure sensors, eyes wide with concern. "Miss Lily?" "How many?" Lily asked into the radio, her voice steady. 20, maybe 30. All professional, got their hands on military-grade tech somehow. Lily... Miller's voice grew grave. "They're not just hitting random targets. They're studying your old defense systems, learning from each town they strike, getting better at dismantling them." Emma burst through the workshop door, still wearing her diner apron. "Lily, you need to see this." She held out her tablet, displaying security footage from a town called Riverbrook. Lily watched as Hawthorne's men methodically disabled a defensive grid she'd designed just last month. "They're adapting," Lily said quietly, "learning the patterns." "That's not all," Miller continued over the radio. "Got word from Director Hayes. Someone's feeding them intel, detailed specs of your older military systems. They know how you think, Lily, how you build." Lily's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, contingencies. The defense network she'd built around Pine Grove was more sophisticated than anything she'd designed before, but if Hawthorne's team had inside knowledge... "Miss Lily?" Amy's voice was small but determined. "Remember what you taught me about systems, how every defense needs a weakness," Lily finished, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Every system needs a deliberate weakness, Amy. Something that looks like a flaw, but isn't. Because the first thing an attacker does is look for weaknesses," Amy recited proudly. "And if you know where they'll look, you can control how they'll attack." Lily squeezed her apprentice's shoulder. "Good girl. You've been paying attention." Emma stepped closer, concern evident in her features. "Lily, what are you thinking?" "They're right," Lily said, moving to her workbench. "I've been too predictable, building the same kinds of systems, just more complex versions of what I did. In the military." Her fingers flew over her tablet, making rapid adjustments to Pine Grove's defensive grid. "Time to show them something new." "What do you need?" Emma asked. "Time and trust." Lily looked up at her friends. "What I'm about to do, it's going to look like I'm dismantling our defenses, like I'm leaving us vulnerable. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." Emma's hand found Lily's, squeezing gently. "Always." Over the next hours, Lily worked with focused intensity. To outside observers, it appeared she was shutting down security systems, creating gaps in the defensive perimeter. Amy watched in fascination as her mentor deliberately introduced what looked like flaws into their carefully constructed protections. "It's like a puzzle, isn't it?" the girl observed. "You're making them see what they expect to see." "Exactly," Lily nodded. "Hawthorne knows my old patterns, thinks he can predict how I'll try to protect the town. So we'll give him exactly what he expects to find, and then show him something he's never seen before." As the sun began to set, Director Hayes's SUV pulled up outside the workshop. The director looked grim as she entered. "Lily, our intelligence suggests Hawthorne's less than 2 hours out. Whatever you're planning is already in motion." Lily cut her off. "But I need something from you. Your clearance codes for the military satellite network." Hayes's eyebrows shot up. "That's highly irregular, Rebecca." Lily's voice was quiet but intense. 5 years ago in Kandahar, you told me you believed in my methods, that sometimes the best defense looks like no defense at all. Do you still believe that? The two women locked eyes, years of shared history and understanding passing between them. Finally, Hayes nodded, pulling out her secure phone. Whatever you're planning, Lily, it better work, because if it doesn't, Pine Grove burns, Lily finished. I know. She turned to Amy. Time for you to get home, little one. What's about to happen here isn't for children to see, but Amy stood her ground, chin lifted stubbornly. You taught me that the best systems have redundancy, Miss Lily, multiple layers of backup. Well, maybe that applies to engineers too. You shouldn't face this alone. Lily felt something tighten in her chest, pride mixed with fear for her young apprentice. Before she could respond, Emma stepped forward. She's right, Lily. Whatever you're planning, we're all part of it. This isn't just your home anymore, it's ours. And we protect what's ours. The radio crackled again with Sheriff Miller's voice. Dust cloud on the horizon, multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Lily, they're coming. Lily Chen looked at the people gathered in her workshop. Emma with her quiet strength, Amy with her brilliant young mind, Hayes with her official authority, and beyond them, an entire town ready to stand together. She thought of David, of Kandahar, of all the systems she'd built trying to keep people safe. Maybe the strongest system wasn't the most complex or the most sophisticated. Maybe it was the one built on trust, on community, on people willing to believe in something bigger than themselves. All right then, she said, pulling up the master control interface. Let's show them what a real defense looks like. The sun sank lower over Pine Grove as Lily Chen made her final preparations, not just as the ghost engineer, but as something more, a protector who had finally found something worth protecting with every tool, every trick, and every trap in her considerable arsenal. The first vehicle crested the ridge overlooking Pine Grove, just as the sun touched the horizon. Lily watched through her modified surveillance system as a convoy of black SUVs and tactical vehicles spread out along the high ground, a professional deployment that spoke of military training. Look at how they're positioned, Amy whispered, studying the tactical display. Just like you taught me about coverage zones. Good eye, Lily nodded. They're setting up interlocking fields of fire. Hawthorne's learned a few things. She tapped a command into her console, and throughout Pine Grove, lights began going dark. Street by street, building by building, the town seemed to power down. Ghost. Protocol initiated, the system announced in its calm electronic voice. Emma shifted nervously beside Lily. Everything going dark, that's part of your plan? They'll expect me to light up the town, Lily explained, fingers dancing across her controls, to create bright zones and blind spots. Instead, we're going dark, making them rely on their night vision equipment. Through the surveillance feed, they watched Hawthorne emerge from the lead vehicle. Even at this distance, his confident stride was unmistakable. He raised a tactical radio to his mouth, and suddenly his voice filled the workshop through Lily's intercepted communication feed. I know you're listening, Chen. Those are military-grade scramblers you're using to hack our comms. Your signatures, all over them. He paused, scanning the darkened town. Nice touch with the blackout, making us depend on our nods. Classic ghost engineer thinking. Lily remained silent, watching as his men began their advance. They moved with practiced precision, each team covering the others as they approached the town's outer defensive perimeter. They're going to hit the weak point in the southwest quadrant, Amy said suddenly, the gap you created in the sensor grid. Very good, Lily smiled. And why there specifically? Because it's where you would expect them to come from. The blind spot that looks too obvious to be real, so they'll think it's actually secure, which makes them confident it's really a blind spot after all. Someone's been paying attention to their lessons on tactical psychology. Lily squeezed her apprentice's shoulder. Now watch what happens when they try to exploit that gap. On the screens, Hawthorne's lead team approached the apparent weakness in the defensive line. Their thermal imaging would show them a clear corridor. Their electronic countermeasures would detect no active defenses, and their pathway would seem suspiciously easy. 5 seconds. Lili counted down softly. 4, 3, 2, the moment. Hawthorne's men crossed the threshold of the sensor gap. Every piece of electronic equipment they carried suddenly began broadcasting on all frequencies. Their tactical radios, night vision goggles, even their weapons' electronic sights, all of them transformed into signal beacons, painting their exact positions on Lili's tactical display. "What did you do?" Hayes asked, leaning forward to study. "The screen reversed the polarity on their own equipment," Lili explained. "The gap in our defenses was actually a focused electromagnetic field. The more sophisticated their gear, the more it works against them." "Classic Chen," Hayes shook her head admiringly, "using their own strength as a weakness." But Hawthorne wasn't finished. His voice crackled through the compromised radio network. "Clever, Chen, very clever. But did you really think we wouldn't prepare for your electronic warfare tricks?" Suddenly, Lili's screens flickered as new signatures appeared, dozens of them, approaching from multiple directions. Simple devices, mechanical rather than electronic, immune to her electromagnetic countermeasures. "Backup teams," Lili noted calmly, "using old-school equipment, no electronics to compromise." "Miss Lili," Amy's voice carried a tremor of worry, "they're going to outflank the automated defenses." "No, little one." Lili's smile held a hint of her old tactical brilliance. "They're going exactly where I want them." She pressed a sequence of commands, and throughout Pine Grove, hidden panels began to open in the streets, the walls, the seemingly ordinary infrastructure she'd spent months modifying. But instead of emerging weapons or barriers, they released something else, a fine, almost invisible mist. "What is that?" Emma asked. "A specially formulated chemical marker," Lili explained. "Harmless, but it binds to organic material, skin, clothing, equipment, and when it does..." She flipped another switch, and suddenly ultraviolet lights activated throughout the town. In an instant, every one of Hawthorne's men became visible, their bodies and gear glowing bright purple under the UV radiation. "Now, Sheriff," Lili spoke into her radio. "Pattern Delta." From concealed positions around the town, Miller's deputies and the Volunteer Defense Force began their carefully coordinated response. Non-lethal rounds, rubber bullets, beanbags, and Lili's own specially designed shock pellets found there, marks with devastating accuracy. "You see, Amy," Lili continued her lesson even as the battle unfolded, "sometimes the best defense isn't about stopping an attack. It's about controlling how it happens, making your enemy think they're being clever, while they walk right into your real trap." Through it all, Hawthorne's voice remained calm, analytical. Phase 1 response, just like Kandahar, which means... "He's figured it out," Lili straightened. "Emma, get Amy to the shelter, now." "But Miss Lili," Amy protested, "this isn't a drill." "Little one, go." As Emma hurried Amy away, Hayes stepped closer to the control station. "What's happening, Lili?" "He knows my patterns too well." Lili's fingers flew across the controls, making rapid adjustments. All of this, the electronic warfare, the chemical markers, the non-lethal countermeasures, it's exactly what the ghost engineer would do, which means... "It's what he expected," Hayes finished. "This whole attack was a feint." Lili nodded grimly. "The real threat's still coming, and for once I don't know what it is." In the final confrontation, Hawthorne revealed his true plan. A devastating electromagnetic pulse that would have fried not just Lili's defenses, but every piece of electronic equipment in Pine Grove. But he had underestimated one crucial thing. Lili Chen wasn't just the ghost engineer anymore. She was part of a community, While Hawthorne focused on defeating her electronic systems, he never noticed Amy and the other townspeople implementing the mechanical backup defenses Lily had taught them to build. Simple, elegant machines that needed no power to operate. When his EMP device activated, Pine Grove didn't go dark. Instead, a series of counterweights and pressure plates triggered, neutralizing his remaining forces with nets, barriers, and the town's own modified irrigation system. The last stand came down to Lily and Hawthorne in her workshop, where he discovered that her most devastating trap wasn't electronic or mechanical. It was knowledge itself. Every defense she'd built, every system she'd created, had been a lesson for the townspeople. Pine Grove hadn't just received protection, it had learned to protect itself. Today, Pine Grove stands as a model for community defense across the country. The research facility Lily runs with Director Hayes trains engineers from other towns, teaching them that the strongest security comes not from sophisticated technology alone, but from people working together to protect what matters. Amy Parker is now the facility's youngest instructor, teaching other children that engineering isn't just about building walls. It's about building connections. Emma and Lily finally found time for that coffee date they'd been dancing around, and the workshop that once housed only machines now rings with laughter and life. As for Lili Chen, she still fixes tractors and builds irrigation systems. But now, she does it knowing that her greatest creation isn't any single defense mechanism. It's the community of protectors she helped forge, each one carrying forward the legacy of the ghost engineer in their own way. They say that on quiet evenings, you can still hear the hum of machinery from her workshop, where she continues to teach new generations that the best defense isn't about stopping attacks. It's about building something worth protecting. If you enjoyed this story about resilience, community, and finding strength in unexpected places, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We've got more inspiring tales coming up that you won't want to miss. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. Your support means everything to us, and we can't wait to share more stories that touch your heart and spark your imagination.